And welcome back to part 35 of Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne, where today we're sidetracking a little away from the Tower Kagutsuchi, because now we have all the other Magatamas in the game, and we got the Lord's Sword from the Cathedral of Shadows. We can now access this shrine over here. The Bando Shrine. Within here are not one, not two, but 4 optional bosses. Taking all 4 of them down will cause the main shrine in the middle of this, that bit that's like stuck to the ceiling, to lower so we can step onto it. The 4 optional bosses, in my opinion, are like some of the hardest fights in the game. At least for me, that no other fight in this game, other than say like the Matador and Dante 1, put up as much as a threat as these guys did. Additionally, if you look at our levels, I grinded a little off screen in preparation for this. The Magatama we got has a skill on it that I desperately wanted, so beelined grinding for that over anything else. And that is, I'm probably going to pronounce it dead wrong. When they get into a fight and I scroll over it, I'll give it another go, but I think it's like Freykegel, or Freykegel, or something like that. But it's a skill that you learn from the Magatama that you can buy from the Tower Kagutsuchi. And it is the best physical based skill in the game. It does almighty level damage, it's physical based, has a high crit rate. It is single target, but that's fine. That doesn't matter. Like, Deadly Fury makes up for that. Deadly Fury is a great heavy group wide, so having a single target super heavy attack sort of thing, that's fine. But it's an amazing skill, and if you can get a hold of it, do so, because it will carry you through the rest of the game quite comfortably. But the way this place works is that you need to lower that main structure at the top. The only way to do that is to lower all 4 of the pillars. Every time you do, however, a boss will interrupt. Are you attempting to lower this pillar? If you plan on entering the shrine, you must defeat me. Now let us fight. You might recognize the aesthetical design of these guys, because we actually fought one of them before to get a hold of one of the Magatamas. The last one of the 4 we'll be fighting is that guy. And his name slips my mind because all of them have very exaggerant names. I say exaggerant, they're tied very heavily to their mythos. It's just they're all very long names. I think it's a better word for it, so I just struggle to remember it from time to time. All 4 of these guys I find very, very difficult. No matter what run it is, what my build is, I always struggle with these guys a little bit. And like, I managed to get through them kinda comfortably. It's not going to be without casualties. In this fight, I think I end up finishing this fight with only 3 of my members around. And I think the same again happens for the second one. But yes, this entire video is going to be the entirety of this optional dungeon. But the reward at the end of it is so drastically worth it. Like that Freykegel. But the reward on the other side is so drastically worth it that no, you should absolutely be going for it. Even if you've no real intent of going for the true demon ending, if you want to make the end game significantly easier for yourself, still go out of your way to go for this. I can still recommend it. The biggest thing to be wary of in this fight is that if this enemy happens to war cry you, or taunt you to lower your defense, or uses it to card you, this fight can turn one-sided extremely quickly. This thing can destroy you. Its physical attacks are bafflingly strong. And it's specifically its physical attacks that will cause trouble. So it might not be a bad idea to come equipped with Tetrakan. It does have magic skills to make it that you can't spam Tetrakan. But you're still going to have trouble. It is weak to Argi though, so make sure that you make the most of that while you're at it. Just for the extra turns. Oh, here's a good idea, though, a point of what I mean though. It's using a Mabufu Dine, but it boosted its magic before it did it. And then, alright, so its turn has been boosting its magic, using a group wide, and then beast eyeing to get an extra attack in. It gets a crit, one-shots Takeshimi. That's what I mean. This fight can turn on its head so stupidly quickly if you get unlucky. I think even if that wasn't a crit, there was a good chance that would have killed, or at least put her into very close to critical. So I just don't use a Balm of Rising. I know that these guys are a problem, so I'm not going to mess around with anything less. I'm just going to go for the biggest items I have, since I know I probably won't end up using them that much in any other fight. Like, these 4 fights I said for are the ones that give me the most trouble. I wouldn't say they're the hardest fights in the game. The true final boss on the true demon ending is. And rightly so, considering how late it is into it and how much you have to do to even unlock it. But in terms of what ends up catching me off guard the most when I go into fight, it's always these 4. And as I said before, you don't have to fight them. It's entirely optional. I just choose to do it because the reward's so worth it. Also, there's Kugel doing its work. I'm just going to call it that. I might be dead wrong in the pronunciation, and if I am, oh well. I accept that. But I like the animation of it. Some of the animations are a little bit like, okay. Like, Divine Shot's a cool one, because you charge all this energy in your hand, and you fire off like a white laser beam at the enemy. Deadly Fury's great, where you just like, do like a katana slash almost, with like a light beam sword. But Kugel is just, I'm gonna head laser this son of a bitch. It's just goofy to me. It's cool, but it's goofy. Is this where I'm trying to get the Lakshmi back in? Good. So I can do with the full party. But the thing is that any buffs I did on my party don't apply to the Lakshmi because she was out of the fight. So there's a magic attack, there's a glacial blast, it dodges, so it puts it down to 1, with Bufu dying, just to wrap it up. The reason why I brought that then up because there's a good chance it could have used Beastie on that last one to get more turns, if it so chose. And so I'm always kind of nervous it's gonna. But we're starting to rip into it a little bit now. I said this is 1 of 4, and we do the whole of this dungeon this part, so this boss fight doesn't take forever. None of them particularly do, thankfully. It's just all 4 of them together make up most of this video. Because this dungeon's tiny, really. You can see everywhere you need to go. The only bit that might take you a second is that there are teleporters, but the teleporters are color-coded, so you can see exactly where they all go. So, if you're struggling, go back to the very top, and just look down over the edge and just like plan out your pathing until you can get to all 4 of the pillars. You can see everywhere you need to go. There isn't any real tricks of the eye here. Like the puzzle is just get to the pillars, so you could just waddle around. But there's another unfortunate crit. I think the reason why it's getting guaranteed crits... No, I know the reason why it's getting guaranteed crits, but it can get it anyway because its crit rate's kind of high. It's because Lakshmi keeps on getting frozen. So the moment it gets frozen, it prioritizes critting her. And because it's a guaranteed crit off that status condition, well, Lakshmi gets screwed over. But Lakshmi's dead twice. And I do show off the stat difference from my grind that I did between videos. Because the only other thing that is different is that Dante's on level 83. And I did that because I wanted Sun's Oath. I was considering grinding him out to get showtime. But when I was planning, I realized very quickly if I did that, by the time Dante gets to that, because Dante takes a lot of experience to level up, Demi-Fiend's level would just barely be too high for me to be happy with that. But I want it to still be challenging. I don't want to be over-leveled. And I feel like if I got Dante to 84 or 85, Demi-Fiend would be way too high a level than himself. He'd end up like 86 or 87, just because of how much experience Dante needs. So having Demi-Fiend be level 82, and then I think I reached the final boss at level 83. Like that to me I'm happy with that level. I can take that. But because I got Sun's Oath on Dante, it means his physical attacks have Pierce, and the sole reason for that is because then I can show him off in the true final boss, which is my intention. It's the ultimate personal retribution for me, because in the original Nocturne, Dante was worthless in the true final boss because because the final boss blocks him. Right, he's resistant to everything. So Dante does like -5 damage, it feels like, per hit, and he was the only thing in the entire game that couldn't get Pierce. So being able to rectify that in this remaster and have Pierce on Dante, for like for mostly just me, it was kind of decided the moment that was announced that Dante was going to have Pierce. I was gonna carry Dante in the final fight. I was gonna bring him in. Who he swaps in and out of, well, you'll find out when we get there. But there was no way I wasn't gonna, like, leave Dante out. This boss can double up on the magic attack boosting. But now he's frozen Lakshmi again, so he immediately Beast Eyes, which means she's dead because it's a focus. And then he's gonna attack, yep. And she's dead again. And he tries to go for it again, it's a bit cheeky. He's like, alright. But that's the most annoying thing in the fight. If the Bufu catches you and freezes one of you, it will follow up with a Beast Eye and kill. But thankfully on the very next attack, I get the kill on G-Code Toden, I think that was, or something like that. Also, Pisaka levels up again, because of course it bloody does. Oh, there's Cerberus' stats, by the way. I do show off, like, the stats going through. But everyone's got a bit of a bump up, because all 3 of my main demons have had a few Mitama fusions to boost their stats. Whilst Demi-Fiend being level 82, his stats are now slightly different from what they were, because they've gone up a little bit. And now I have a Magic Incense. I think I throw it on Cerberus, just because then Mega Deleon has a bit more power. Yeah, here we go. So you might want to pause the video to get a look, but that's what all the stat numbers look like for everyone. Lakeshmi is the only one kind of falling behind a little bit. Like, she's got max magic, but the rest of her stats are significantly lower than the rest. Like, Daisojo is pretty well-rounded as a whole. Like, I think the only thing that's a little low is either physical strength or luck, one or the other. It might be physical strength. And Cerberus is the physical powerhouse, and is catching up a little bit with magic, but that's kind of about it. But yeah, that's kind of the general party setup, and that's how they're gonna, for the most part, stay for the rest of this run. Like I said, they are the final team. And I'm happy with the final team, if I'm honest. I wish I did more fusions and did more demon grinding on the main adventure, but that's my bad, because I just, like, as I've mentioned throughout the whole journey, I fall on my laurels too quickly. Anytime I'm playing an SMT game, it's a curse that follows me constantly, where I get into a rhythm and I just completely forget about getting demons. And suddenly I've done a lot of decent stretch of the game, and I end up making it harder for myself because I don't have the variety of access that I should have. It's not the end of the world, but it is what it is. But now we're up on the opposite end, I believe. You can see that I'm debating which is the right path. This is a dead end, so I can't take that. You need to go all the way around. What's kind of interesting is that when you first enter the shrine, there's a path to your left and a path to your right. One of them ends up leading to 3 pillars. The last one only leads to 1. But the one that leads to the 1 is the one I heavily recommend doing last, because that's the one that's going to lead to our rematch with the version of these guys that we fought before. We had to use the magic stone to open the shrine. That was like the shrine that was like to the left of Asakusa. I forget what it's called, but that one. You're going to see a little cut there, because that was me like just checking through my items and whatnot, ready for the next fight, because I said, because none of these guys are easy. As the pillar lowers. But yeah, to give you guys a heads up, after this, the next video is going to be the rest of the tower, and the video after that is the final bosses. So we really don't have that much left in this game. Which is kind of depressing, because I've actually really enjoyed this. It's been a bit all over the place, parts of it. Like, some of it's been far more difficult than it's had any right to. Some of it's been pretty damn frustrating. A lot of the frustrating stuff was behind the scenes, thankfully, so like that doesn't show through in the recording. The only thing that I kept in were those 2 deaths, both of which were a little debatable in their own way. Like, the first one was just really unlucky. That first death in the 3rd Culpa of the Labyrinth of Amala, just getting that random Mudoon was like, okay, thanks game. Because that was before we even had Endure to kind of like save our neck with it, so we just got screwed over. But that Osei in the Amala Temple, that was just mean. It just getting the crits and prioritizing me, triggered Endurance, and then attacked me again afterwards. Like, that was just so mean-spirited. But the fact that they're the only 2 game overs I got in this entire run, I am immensely happy with myself for it. Because I was expecting a lot more. And I mean a lot more. If I ever cover SMT4, I guarantee you it'll be an entirely different beast. If they ever remaster Shin Megami Tensei 4, like they put it on consoles and whatnot, that will be an entirely different beast. And I wish I was kidding on that. There will be a lot of deaths in SMT4. Because SMT4, it's very encounter by encounter difficult. The main thing that makes this fight scary is that this thing is entirely focused on defense matching. So if you lower its defense, it will start boosting it. If you boost yours, it will start lowering yours. But if you leave it at neutral, it'll eventually jump on the bandwagon essentially and start doing nerfs and boosts anyway. So if you let this fight escape you, you're gonna know about it. For the sake of a guaranteed crit, I had Demi-Fiend attack there. But to talk briefly about what's coming after this project finishes, I'll probably take a slight break like I always do, but after that, it will be Neptunia Reverse, the remaster of a remaster of the original Neptunia. Which with like some extra bells and whistles because it's the PS5 version, so they kind of made the most of the PS5 version by adding a few things that like make the most of like the actual like it's got better visuals, it's got ray tracing, like it's got some of the standard stuff in a PS5 remaster that's coming around in this early part of the generation. Whereas like a lot of PS5 games are just getting all these little cleanups here and there. It's nothing major. It looks a lot better than I'd say Rebirth 1 on PC. And then the Rebirth 1 on PC looked great. So Reverse, you're going to get muddled in the name, stick with me. Rebirth is the first remaster, Rebirth Plus is the enhanced version of the first remaster, and Reverse is the new PS5 remaster. All of the original Neptunia 1, the non-canon Neptunia. So don't worry if you get muddled in the names listening in. You'll get used to it, because there'll almost definitely be a Reverse 2 and a Reverse 3 later on. I'm willing to actually bet money on it that it will happen. Which will work out for me, because that'll be the easiest, like, Let's Plays to kind of put on my schedule to say, okay, yeah, we'll just do the second and third game. Then I've got all 4 Neptunias, or the main Neptunia games covered. over time. And then at some point, Death End 3 will happen. Like, I've been making a point saying, Death End 2, that I'm very much expecting Death End 3 to come sooner rather than later. And there's been a few things that, like, the Death End community have noticed. Like, there's been a few odd videos online that seem to be hinting towards it, but I'm not going to say it is for sure until we hear something about it. It's just they seem suspicious. It could be something else entirely. But there has been a lot of things that people have just kind of gone, hang on a minute, what's this about? Like, there's been like a binary code that came out that like referenced death and ending and restarting, like Death End Request. There was like an audio file that was like, I forget what it's called, where it's like the beeps and boops. But it was like there was one that had like a reference to like Enigma, and it's like there's a lot of little things that might be tied to Death End, but seem just a tad too could be coincidence still for me to actually assume that. But Death End 3 I'm absolutely doing when that comes out. Hopefully it won't be the same situation it was with Death End 2. As much as I absolutely loved doing Death End 2, if you recall, the only reason I did Death End 2 at the time is because DLC for Devil May Cry 5 was announced, and I was originally planning on doing Devil May Cry 5 at that point, to make it so there's a little bit more of a gap between my blind playthrough and my recording playthrough. But no, it ended up being I finished my New Game Plus run on Death End, and then immediately started recording because they announced the bloody DLCs. I was like, well, I don't want to do it now. I want to wait till the DLC's out. But it worked out fine, because, and I've gone on record of saying this, my favourite Let's Plays, the ones that I've enjoyed the most, and the ones that, if I'm honest, have done the best, which is odd considering I think I'd like to think they're a lot more niche. Also, ow, Daisojo, 706. But my favourite Let's Plays that I've done, and the ones that oddly, despite being more niche, have been the most popular in terms of view count, have been both the Death End games. And it makes me so happy that this niche little game that I've really come around to loving. Because if you remember, the only reason I covered Death End 1 is because I didn't want to do Dragon Star straight away. But I did it because I knew I was going to be extra critical on it. So I wanted to kind of break down what I liked and didn't like. But I ended up gaining a better appreciation of the game through that recording and liking it a lot more. And then Death End 2, in my opinion, is one of Idea Factory's best works, straight up. I know it wasn't it was GJRPG as well, but in terms of like Compile Heart published games, it's one of the best ones I played. I love that game. It's one of my top 5 favourite games of last year. And when you consider Final Fantasy VII Remake and Genshin Impact came out last year, I'd like to think that's a pretty impressive feat for my kind of games. Like, I know they aren't everyone's games, but for me, that's huge. That it got that high on the radar for me, that I loved it that much. But last year was also the year that this channel was blessed with Data Live. I mean, I got into Data Live, and I've been a huge Data Live fan ever since. I still keep up with the updates. I've watched some of Data Bullet. I've steered away from watching all of it because it was like a fan translation, and it was a bit all over the place. So I want to wait until an official. I'm hoping for a dub, because I know the dub's not everyone's cup of tea, but I genuinely like Data Live's English dub. Like, I genuinely enjoy all of them. I know a lot of people say that Toka sounds kind of not as innocent as she should be for a character, but I genuinely think she sounds alright. The only character I ever had a problem with at first was Origami, because I didn't like how overly robotic they made her, like how deliberately robotic they made her. Like, I get that she's a very stiff character in that sense, and she kind of loosens, like, after Season 3 a little bit. Well, I'll say that, like, Season 4's not out yet, but near the end of Season 3, she starts to loosen in her voice and how she talks a bit more. But I just didn't like that voice direction decision. I like the actress, and I think the actress does a lot of amazing stuff. I just didn't like the direction with that, but that's literally it. Everyone else, I love the English dub. I think Kaguya and Yuzuru sound perfect in the English dub. Natsumi is spot on in the dub. Kurumi Tokisaki is... it doesn't matter who's voicing her, she always sounds perfect to me. And I know that's a little bit of my bias kicking in, but she always sounds brilliant. I genuinely adore Kurumi, both her Japanese and her English. Her Japanese captures the craziness a lot better than the English, but the English captures the sinisterness of it a lot better than the Japanese, I feel. Like, I can feel like the like intimidating energy from her better in the English version, whilst I feel the more, not quite yandere, because they toned that down a lot in, like, as it went on, when they wanted to make Kurumi more of a standout character and not just a villain. But that more craziness and that yandere-esque side of her comes through better in the Japanese. So I feel like there's a good balance between them. So I really don't mind waiting, and to an extent would rather wait for an English dub of Data Bullet. Speaking of English releases of anything though, when's Data Live 4 coming out? The game Data Live 4. Ren's Dystopia. Because I made a promise, so when that comes out, I'm going to get time to live stream that, because that was some of the most fun I've ever had on this channel, was those live streams. Just kicking back and going through it. I had a fucking blast. I was anytime I go back and like watch it for old time's sake, you can hear it. You can hear it. Like throughout most of it, I'm giggling, laughing, or just reacting to things quite loudly, because I get really into it and really enjoyed it. And so I'm super excited for Ren Dystopia to come out. It just needs to be announced in the West. Like, it's out in Japan and has been since like last September. Like, when's it coming, guys? Come on. And I am aware of the horror stories that it took like 4 or 5 years to get Data Live reincarnation out of Japan to the West. But Data Live's a lot more popular in the West than it's ever been. So please don't make it another 3 years. Please don't do that. I want to live stream it. It'll be fun. Speaking of live streams, I know I haven't done them as much, but it's just I've been very busy outside of doing it. I do want to squeeze them in though. Maybe like on my break between this and Neptunia Reverse, because I don't want to jump, like literally this video ends, the next day I'm doing Neptunia Reverse. I want to do something else in between. Maybe then I'll do a couple live streams where I've not got a project on the go. Because to be honest, one of the biggest reasons why I haven't really been able to do much else outside of it is that Nocturne, in terms of planning, has had the most planning effort and time put into it than any other project I have ever done for the channel. Like, almost everything down to the detail was planned in advance. Excessively. And so, the amount of extra work that required, of like writing notes, like, I remember like when I was going through one of the dungeons, I brought up my notepad and it was like 6 or 7 pages to one dungeon. And like that, there's notes on every single dungeon in this game. Just some of them are like 1 or 2 lines. There's a couple notes that are like specific enemies that can appear that I need to be wary of. Certain elements that might screw me over into certain bosses. Like, there's so many notes in it. Like, the only other project that came close to Nocturne is now in terms of note making was Final Fantasy XII. My Let's Play of Final Fantasy XII, that had a lot of notes for it to make sure it was on point. But in comparison, going into Neptunia Reverse, I don't need to make notes. I'm going to be honest. The entire Neptunia series, part of the appeal of them is that although there's a respectable amount of difficulty about them, they're my comfort food JRPGs. The entire Neptunia series. They're the games I go to whenever I just want to feel good. And they do. But they're very, like, soft, they're very funny, they're cheeky. It's like, when we cover it, you'll see what I mean. Neptunia 1 is excessively cheeky, where they were still trying to find an identity for themselves, and hadn't quite got there yet, in the same way they do in the later games. Because I think the balance between being a little cheeky, a little sexy, a little goofy, having the video game references, whilst having an actual gameplay system under all of that, is better balanced as the series goes on, and the fourth game I think is a shining example. I think that game is extremely well balanced of all of their material and writing structure, and it even gets away with being quite serious in the last act with Uzume, and I really like how that is. But it's a lot more unruly in the first game, and I think the only thing I'll need to be wary of is that I might end up having to censor the odd thing just for the sake of YouTube. It'll be touch and go, and we'll see as it goes. I'm not going to do what I did with Neptunia 4, because back when I covered Neptunia 4, the censorship policies on it were nowhere near as strict. And so there's a lot I got away, mostly in the thumbnails, that if you look back on now, there's like 2 or 3 thumbnails I've entirely lost, that I just don't have anymore, and it's been replaced with like a default one. That's because the original thumbnails YouTube had enough with. Like, one of them was when it was Netgear, Big Nep, and Uzume sharing a bath, and I had that be the thumbnail. YouTube pulled that down eventually, and the other was, oh, is it Sisha? Is Sisha the one that you meet with Blan, where it's her like all tied up in imprisoned? That one YouTube wasn't keen on either. But like with Neptunia reverse, YouTube censorship policy has changed a lot since then, and if I want the videos to go up unscathed, I need to be at least conscious of that. For the most part, it'll be alright, because the Neptunia series, despite what the stereotypes towards the series would have you think, really isn't that over-sexualized. They are very respectful of their characters for the most part. They just have a lot of cheeky moments. I think that's the best way to put it. Like, they're not overly exaggerately sexualized, like, say, Senran Kagura, where in that game, if you get hit, your clothing rips off. Which, speaking of, talking to something I'm actually really looking forward to, that crossover game. There's a crossover game being worked on that's coming out, I think, this month. It is either this month or early next month in Japan. That is Neptunia crossing over a Senran Kagura in a 3D action game, hack and slash crossover kind of thing. And it looks really fucking fun. Every time they show off new footage for it, I'm like, wow, that actually looks really strong. And I think the reason why I'm buzzing for it is that I remember Neptunia Action Unleashed, which was a spin-off on the Vita, and I remember Cyber Dimension, and both of them, looking at this new game, this Ninja Nep, as I'm just going to call it, until we get it's a Western title announced, it all feels like they were stepping stones to it, because this feels like the execution. Action Unleashed was like the clunkiest of the lot, and Cyber Dimension had fun gameplay, but it was kind of repetitive firstly, and secondly the game was way too short, and so it ended up feeling like a bit too let down. But this new one, Ninja Net, looks amazing, and it looks like it's very healthy. And they keep on showing that it's literally cram-packed with content because it's like this ultimate dream project. And they announced it years ago. They announced it in like 2017, 2018. So it's been in development longer than like any mainline Neptunia. So it's like it's borderline a mainline Nep, just it's not a turn-based. Like, it's got a mainline level budget. So I'm super fucking giddy for it. But I'm gonna get the collector's edition for that when it comes around. But I need to talk about the fact that we've got Bishamoten again. This is the rematch against him, because we fought him before. The idea of this fight compared to the other, compared to his previous fight, compared to the other 3, is probably the simplest, but he's also the hardest in my opinion. Well, which makes sense considering he's the last one you're going to fight. But this fight takes the longest, and he does kick our ass the most. But back to what I was talking about with Neptunia. Like, this, I'm really excited for that Ninja Nep. I won't cover it straight away when it comes out, obviously. Well, I say obviously, but there's always been exceptions. But for the most part, I won't. I want to play it myself. The only thing I hope they address, and it's the biggest crime of Cyber Dimension, is that Cyber Dimension infamously has a startup load screen. So when you fire up the game, it loads everything in the game at first, and then once you start it up, like once you click go, there's no loading whatsoever. Which is okay, yeah, that's fine. You've played games like, I don't know, like Grand Theft Auto 5, you firmly understand how that works, where it can take a little while to load, but once it's done, you're good. Cyber Dimension, though, it was like 4.5 minutes, and I wish I was exaggerating. It is hellishly long. It genuinely, the amount, like, anytime I went to fire, the reason why I'm not doing a Let's Play of Cyber Dimension, despite the fact I enjoy it, like I said, the gameplay gets a little repetitive and it is a little on the short side, but I did enjoy it. The only reason why I'm never covering it is because of how often I will do a bit of the game, save and quit, go into my editor, add the file, work on it, go back to the game, fire it up. If I try and do that process with Cyber Dimension, I will lose my mind, because you genuinely have just under 5 minutes of waiting before you can even start it up properly again. But I genuinely, when I got the game at first and started playing through it, I would click go, and then go have food, and then come back when it was done. Like, the first time I fired it up, I was adamant that it was just like an install screen, where it was still installing bits and pieces. Sort of like, you know how like that happened a lot on the PS3 and 360 era, where you'd get like install discs, and if you clicked on it, it'd just bring up like an installing screen. Then when it hits 50%, it'd say change to the next disc, that sort of thing. I thought it was that because it was taking so long. So when I fired it up the next time, the following day, and it was that long again, I was like, oh no. This is actually how long it takes to load up everything. Ugh. So I desperately hope they address that and they don't make that mistake again in the next game. If they do, I just hope then it's got PS5 update support, and the PS5 version you can clean it up on the loading. But we'll see. Because we like, outside of Neptunia Reverse, which was designed from the beginning to be a PS5 title, we haven't had any PS4 title that Compile Heart have released get a like PS5 support patch. So Death End Request and Dragonstar are still 30 frames with this like around about the same level of loading. Like, it's slightly quicker from the nature of the machine, but that's it. Like, they don't have any proper next-gen support patches on them. But when things like Mary Skelter Final comes out, the new Neptunia, the Ninja Net, things like that, because there'll be PS4 titles that have come out after the PS5 is out, I'll be curious to see if they do have PS5 update support from patches or workarounds of any kind, or whether it's literally just one version fits all, like it is currently with Death End 2 and Dragonstar. Which I hope not. I hope they do make it so the PS5 gets some extra quality of life. Even if it's only 60 frames, like, I'll take it. Just make it so it's a bit more quality of life. Like, 60 frames, better loading, and I'll take it. So I know we might not, because we just don't know yet, but I'd be happy if we did. And speaking of Mary Skelter, considering all the other Idea Factory games I've covered on this channel, I'm sure there's at least one of you that's curious if I'll ever cover a Mary Skelter game. And I have mentioned it before, but I will reiterate. I enjoy it, but I don't know how I would make it fun for a Let's Play, considering it's a dungeon crawling first-person adventure for all of them, and you can go great lengths of just dungeon crawling at a time before you get any kind of story or anything like that. And I'm sure, like, yeah, we've done a lot of dungeon crawling in Nocturne. Like, Nocturne has very little of its storytelling, but there's a lot of variety in the environments. It's not first person in like a grid-based dungeon. Like, there's layers and floors and everything. Like, I just don't think I can make those Ancient Odyssey, Mary Skelter styled games fun to talk through. Not just for you guys, but fun for me to talk through, if I'm honest. I can already see it being kind of boring. I'm never going to say never on it. It's just don't expect it. Like, I'll probably pick up Mary Skelter Final when it comes out in the West, but I've no real grand desire of recording it. I'll probably just do a casual playthrough in my own time. And even then, it's going to be a bit of a mystery for me, because I didn't play much of Mary Skelter 2, so I have no goddamn idea what's going on with the story. Because the Mary Skelter trilogy, like the Death End games, they are kind of intertwined and interconnected with their stories. Which is more frustrating, because like the way it works is that Mary Skelter 2 is a prequel to the original, but if you beat it, and then go back to Mary Skelter 1, there are little collectibles you could find in Mary Skelter 1 once it recognizes you have a save file of completed 2, that could then lead to a secret ending, an extra ending that wasn't in like the original game, that then teases the third, and you're like, what? I'm not going to bother doing that. Do the second game to then unlock an extra ending in the first game. No. I enjoyed the first game, but I didn't enjoy it that much to do that kind of commitment. The biggest threat of this boss, to go back on topic for a minute, is the fact it has Debilitate, so it can lower all of your stats group-wide at once. And so, if you're struggling with this fight, it might be a safe bet to have things like Tetrakan as like an extra safety measure, or Makarakan if it follows up with that. But it won't save you from too much, so don't make it your sole reliance. Just be wary of it. You can see here's me looking for a Dekunda Rock, because for some reason I never get one. I get a Takaja Rock, but I never get a Dekunda Rock. Which would have been real nice. But, oh well. So I just try and buff my defense as like a safety measure and be like, look, if I can at least survive consistently, I will kill it over time. This fight does take a little while. It doesn't take as long as other fights, but it does take a little bit. Like, we still got another, like, 6 minutes or so, I want to say, yet. Like, it's not like the 28+ minutes that Noah was, but it still takes a while. That's cheeky. The amount of magic boost. Did you see that before you follow up a Mega DeLeon? That's going to hit like a truck. That's what ends up making this fight so difficult, is that you can just spam the hell out of it. If you Mega DeLeons, no magic reflection thing in the world will save you. Like, Mega DeLeon will ignore the Karikans, because it's just how it works. Which, speaking of Tetrakan and Makarakan, they have nerfed it in 5. We've seen footage of it. They are going the Persona 5 route with it now. In every older SMT game and Persona 1 through 4, actually I might be mistaken, I might be misremembering, but also I'll revert my point slightly and just say SMT4 backwards. I'll ignore Persona for now, because I honestly can't remember in confidence. But Tetrakan and Makarakan are group-wide when you use them. In 5, they're bringing it to how it is in Persona 5, where it's single target, which is unfortunate, but it makes sense for balance. If you go into a room of enemies and, like, all of them are physical base, one Tetrakan would just end their turn every time, so you could make it so they were just, like, locked to death. And in SMT4, having Tetrakan and Makarakan makes the first half of that game a lot more manageable. So the fact that they're nerfing it to single target just makes sense, because then it's a matter of who you're going to put it on. Like, who's the most valued player if there's a group-wide physical attack coming your way. And it'll probably be your protagonist, because they're going back to SMT 3s. If the protagonist goes down, it's over, and not doing SMT's 4s if the protagonist goes down, but the demons are still alive. The fight will continue, but but you're unlikely to win. Which I don't mind. Like, it feels like SMT 5 is deliberately harkening back more to 3 than 4. Like, there's a lot of 4 elements in it still, but they're harkening back to 3 more just because 3 is the most popular one. And that includes its more punishing difficulty and how it handles its difficulty. Because even though 4 per encounter is harder, 3 as a general experience I think is harder, if that makes any sense. Like, in 4, you go from one fight to the next and both of them feel like they have a good chance of ending you. Whilst in Nocturne, it's the endurance test of getting through everything and building yourself up throughout it all that makes it incredibly difficult. Assuming you don't just get unlucky partway through as well with like a random Moodoon. Or the enemy just prioritizes you and you alone. But in SMT4, you're more likely to die per fight. But you do get into a rhythm and you do find your way through it. And eventually you do feel comfortable not having to save after literally every single encounter. Because you're like, yeah, I can survive like 3 or 4 without having to save, probably. As we get another Dragonite, this little spammer. To be fair, if I had B-style Dragonite, I'd be spamming it too. Well, I mean, why wouldn't you? You could literally make it so the enemy never goes. That's probably why you don't get it. Because can you imagine if you could get it in some form or fashion? Like, there no longer be a challenge in the game, because you just make it so like it's just you and the demon that has it. So then every time it's the other turn, you just have it use B-Side so you can go. But take a 2,000 damage there. It's nice seeing over 1,000 damage at any point in this game, considering how Atlus handle their damage logic in all of their titles. The numbers are never that high usually. So the fact that I can get myself into a point where I can kind of consistently do over 1,000 damage per hit is insanely satisfying. Like, I'd say it's more satisfying than hitting like 9,999 in a Final Fantasy, because it feels like it's a rite of passage, you'll hit it eventually. Whilst in SMT games and Persona games, sometimes you can go throughout the entire like journey of the game, and the maximum damage you ever did at any point in the entire run is like 4,500. So getting over 1,000 is something you have to take. Like in Persona 5, there's only like one encounter where it feels like you can realistically get it, and that's the fight against Abaddon in the True Final Dungeon, where its defense is non-existent, but it has a lot of health. So if you like line up your attack right and hit it with something that it's weak to, you can get over 1,000 damage, but even then it feels like it's just barely. But I remember I did like something like 1,040. Like, it was really not much over. It is nice to see though when you get those numbers pop up, and the little aesthetical detail they added to Persona 5 when it does shows the number on damage makes the 1000 more satisfying as well in its own little way. But that's Persona 5. And that's Persona 5 in a nutshell. That game is extremely visual glamour and like visual aesthetic through the roof. And I'm curious to see what they do with the future of Persona, because Persona now being mainstream and the best selling, it's, even though they're obviously going to do like loads of spin-offs Persona 5, and they already kind of have, they're obviously going to make Persona 6 a little bit sooner than they probably intended, to try and keep the fire going, kind of thing. Keep the energy of the series going. I'm curious to see what they do with 6, because I don't think they'll just do 5 again, in terms of going, let's go super over on the visuals. But they're obviously going to want to do something different. But what are they going to borrow from 5 to help keep Persona's like new identity and make it still feel like it's a step up from what 5 offers, especially in its visual style? Because that was something like, I like the fact that every Persona game, including the original 2, have their own aesthetical style. It feels like every game changes up the style slightly. Like Persona 3 and 4, yeah, they share an engine, but they handle that engine in their own ways. Like Persona 3 uses a lot of dark green and dark blue and like moodier colours, but then has its menu look like parts of a gun. That makes it look like it's like the bullets of a revolver. Whilst Persona 4 has like a lot more brighter colours, but has like this yellow filter in the TV world because of the fog that's in it. But because you're in a TV world, they have like this television. I said televised and television at the same time. Anyway, they have like this TV aesthetic to it, so it looks like you're in like a TV thing and you're like scrolling through channels for your menu options instead. And then Persona 5, I doubt I need to explain that one, where that one went super over the top in visual style and everything. Like everything has like this explosionist effect of words and numbers and sharp colours and like comic book aesthetics, and like it looks amazing. It's still really striking like to this day. Like there's nothing that's really caught my attention in terms of like its HUD and like UI setup in the way Persona 5 did. Also, nearly die there, you know, casual as you do. Let's get Daisojo back in. Because he took a really unfortunate death, and I'm like, please Daisojo, save me with a prayer. Because at 8 health, that's, I don't do it. Was I just going to say, I was just going, oh, Lakeshmi goes last, she can do it. But this boss is nearly down now, I want to say. Like a turn or two left, because we still got to fit in the cutscene of the shrine lowering and us getting our reward. Because there is a cutscene. Essentially, we're going to go meet with Masakado. And if you don't know Masakado or Masakados, it's a old tale of how Tokyo was saved from great evil. Like, Masakado is kind of like the savior of Tokyo. Like the original hero of the land. And so in Japanese myth has great providence and has like a great like respect to in the land of literature and gods in that sense. And so making it that you get the ultimate power from it, yeah, also makes sense. It's also like the ticket to like getting the true ending in 4 or the neutral ending in 4 is chatting to Masakado. Like Masakado's always around. Although I must say, Masakado's design in 4 is wild. Like SMT 4 has some pretty out there redesigns of some of their demons. Masakado's up there. So you look at it, like Masakado's design in 4 and you go, what the fuck? Compared to how he looks like in this. Which, speaking of, now that the boss is down, we can go into the actual inner sanctum shrine to meet with Masakado. And we will get our reward for doing so. But we have a cutscene that'll play out first.
Masakado, the guardian of Tokyo for the last 1,000 years. Thou art the demi-fiend, art thou not? The king of chaos, who hath gained the powers of demons despite being human. Demi-fiend, why hast thou come this far to see me? for mine assistance. But thy Tokyo is a Tokyo my light cannot reach. I cannot set foot in thy world. Let me ask thee a question. Wilt thou bring peace to Tokyo? I shall lend thee my power. Farewell. Be it a new world, it is still Tokyo. Thou art the new guardian of the land.
Our reward is Masakado's power, the true final Magatama of the game. Boosts all stats but luck by 10 and makes you null to everything except Almighty. So nothing can hurt you unless it's an Almighty attack. You can't be instant killed because it will just come up saying block, it will just be null. You're safe from everything. And the skills it learns, after Mega DeLeon, all of them are like repel skills. So you can make it so you repel every element instead if you so want. I don't bother because like once I've got Masakado, I'm pushing for the end of the game anyway. So I don't really bother with that. In fact, I think I get Mega DeLeon. I don't equip it, but I level up once to get Mega DeLeon. And like that's it. I don't level it up again because we finished the game at 83. But that being said, next time on Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne, we're returning to back to where we was in the Tower of Kagutsuchi and continuing onwards to the third chunk of that to hunt down the third Reason Holder, because Chiaki and the Baal Avatar is all that's left. But until then, you guys take care now. Peace.